We're good? Okay. Everybody, it is March 26, 2019. It is 7:03 p.m. and we are going to resume our meeting from earlier today. And I'll call us back to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you're following the agenda, we're on number 3, approval of the minutes. 3-1, February 21st, 2019. 3-2, February 26th, 2019. 3-3, March 6th, 2019. And 3-4, March 12th, 2019. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Number 4, mayor and council reports. So, I've been having so much fun. Busy and fun. I attended, several of us did things together, so I may just say, feel free to share your bits as well, other council members, but I attended an advisory committee meeting with Karen and staff to prep for the meeting that we just had, the open house that we just had about our future land use plan or future land use map. And I will say that the advisory committee that was pulled together are representatives from the city, the county, the development community, real estate agents, and business persons that are in the business of lodging. So it was a good group that was pulled together to start the conversation about how nightly rentals may look after this moratorium's over. I have been working on the advisory committee for USU, as you all know, and we've been having follow-up discussions on fundraising and getting to the goal of the $10 million that USU is trying to raise. We are now $1.5 million away from raising that total of $10 million. But wait, there's definitely conversation about adding to the building a premium fundraising effort that would allow that building to include solar and gray water and other systems that would make it energy efficient and very water positive. So, net positive energy, but then net positive water as well. USU is looking into that, and if we're able to raise that money as a fundraising committee, then they're committed to work to those goals. So I'm very excited to report that. That's a big shift from what USU was saying even just a few months ago about where they were willing to go with their new building. I attended a CIB priority list meeting over at the county building. It was hosted by the Association of Local Government Staff. David and I went, and the group of us ranked what were the top 5 things that we thought should receive CIB funding, and I just wanted to report what came out on top. So the number 1 ranked need for our community is a new EMS facility. And from what I understand, they're going to be moving to the top of the hill, 100 North.
Well, yeah, they're currently there, and they're hoping to expand there. They're going to meet with the county and talk to the county.
So now their plan is to raise money for that expansion instead of the new building that's over by the hospital.
Yeah, and that's been the case for a while.
Yeah. So that was ranked number 1. The funds to do that was ranked number 1 by the group. Number 2 being the airport taxi and parking. I know, Karen, you sit on that board, so it's nice to know that that's a shared goal of the community. Our Stewart Canyon project improvement was ranked number 3. The Spanish Valley multi-use path was number 4, and then the realignment of Spanish Valley with Mill Creek is 5. So that was, I thought, a really nice indicator of what we're looking to spend money on immediately, at least in our community, as it was ranked.
Can I ask a question there?
Yeah, sure.
What's the realignment of Mill Creek and Spanish Valley? What does that mean?
Well, I'm not sure what that the total scope of the project is, but it's basically, it's funky right now, and it would be realigning it so that it's, you probably know. Yes, of course you know. Yes, thank you.
Widening it out, it's expanding the rights of way, it's adding a shared path down one side, straightening it in some places where it can be straightened.
Is this right at
It's
the
whole
auto
length.
Like tom-toms.
thing?
I think.
Okay. So the dip, like, would we be getting rid
It's
of the
the
dip?
whole length of Spanish Valley Drive, eventually.
Yeah, right? Yeah, priority for sure. All right, what else? I attended a really good meeting with Scott Loomis, who's working with the Community Land Trust, to just not only get an update, but share some thoughts about the land trust. Karen and I attended a chamber lunch. I hope that we continue to go to those. One thing to note with the Park Service, Kate Cannon and her boss doing the pullback, as we've all now heard, the Chamber of Commerce, the president and Lacey, who runs the chamber, were quick to comment and say, you know, we didn't support the reservation system as it was, but that doesn't mean we don't support some kind of effort to manage the flow of visitation. We understand that it's full. So I thought that that was a good response to hear that we are, as a community, still looking for solutions for traffic congestion. And I heard that from the chamber. We've been doing these Powerhouse, Mill Creek, Canyon collaborative meetings. Do we still have the information forms and the sign up? Will you just grab them? So we are trying to collect emails, and I'm looking at the Times Independent to help me get this word out. We're looking to gather people's emails so that we can send out a survey. A survey was done in the 90s it was the 90s, right, Karen? The original survey was done in the 90s to find out, yeah, just pass them out and put the sign up somewhere.
Sign up is out front. If anybody wants information, would like to get input on Mill Creek Canyon, it's right here.
So we're really going to try to get as many emails as we can so that we can use that survey that was done in the 90s and revamp it and do it today to find out how people use Mill Creek so that we can manage to those uses, but also the values around that area. And that is really exciting because it's forward momentum of protecting a place that's really important to all of us that live here. Couple more things. We all were so honored to host Representative John Curtis here at City Hall as part of a joint city and county meeting. I was grateful and continue to send him emails and messages and retweet what he says and text saying, you know, thank you so much for coming. It's so important that we are represented, and for him to come and do a town hall, do a joint meeting with us and then a town hall was just really wonderful. And we talked about public lands, healthcare, and perhaps taxing federal campsites, implementing a new tax. Good topics. And then finally, I was invited to speak by this Wallace Stegner Center. They had a symposium last Thursday and Friday, and I was very honored to be invited to speak on a panel looking at Moab as a case study for the way in which recreation and tourism are intertwined with public lands and those impacts on communities. And so I shared with everyone that was attending our our list of unintended consequences, the challenges that we see, the struggles that we have been facing, the comments that we have heard emerging about questioning the way in which we're advertising Moab, the way that it has been advertised, and now the Utah Office of Tourism actually presented before I did and showed a new campaign that they're about to put out called the In Between campaign, where they're going to be advertising places that are not the Mighty Five, but everything in between. One of the images struck me, and it was an image of people swimming in Calf Creek Falls in Escalante. What was concerning to me is that I know Alicia, the land manager, she works for BLM, she's a land manager, and I've had conversations with her about how that parking lot is full. And then I had like a moment of panic, thinking, what if they advertised Powerhouse, Mill Creek? No, but it's a possibility. And so I actually, when I was speaking, I made a point to say, we really need to have a better dialogue with that office. And they came up to me afterward, and I said, what I would really like, regardless of where the conversation goes about how we advertise and how much money we're spending, I would like to develop a focus group down in Moab and in other communities that are getting promoted so that we can first review what's being promoted and make sure there's infrastructure to support it. And then we need to talk about the amount of money that we're spending on advertising. So get ready, because we're about to have a meeting with the Office of Tourism. They're willing to come down, and I said a joint meeting with us and the county council in that office would be a good next step.
What about like using like the tailings pile as the in-between spots?
Yeah.
It's actually fascinating to visit. I recommend a new sign, an interpretive sign. Yes.
Huh.
I think that's a good suggestion. So
As long as you stay outside the perimeter. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
But don't you agree that to have a group in Moab that looks at what would be advertised before it's advertised to be able to make comments?
We all shudder at the idea of Mill Creek, but the reality is there's a lot of other stuff that could end up on that list that would probably
Corona Arch could
set
be
people's hair on fire.
Corona Arch would be another example that we see a full parking lot, because people that are pushed away from arches because of the line will then go to Corona, because it's just you keep going and then you turn left. That parking lot's full too. So we've got some good conversations ahead.
Emily, after they did the Mighty Five, they did the Road to Mighty, which was supposed to fill in the places in between the 5 parks. Is this yet a different thing, or is this still the Road to Mighty?
This is a different thing.
Okay.
It's a different campaign.
What's it called again?
In Between.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can yet find it online, but myself and others, it definitely raised the concern that we have about the impact that tourism is having on our places in between.
Other communities who are similar to ours that were at the conference as well?
Yeah. Yep. Gosh, maybe what I'm going to try to do is see if when I presented and then was on the panel, if they videotaped it so that I can share it with all of you, and then see if I can get a video of some of the other presentations, specifically the one that Vicki from the Office of Tourism presented, that made us all kind of go, whoa. So, and that's it for me. Sorry, that was a lot, but I just really wanted to share. I wanted to share a little bit more about that. So, thanks. That's it for me.
Mine will be real short. I went to the joint city-county meeting with John Curtis and following with the town hall, which I thought was good questions from the community. And then the next day, the county had their meeting on the changing form of government, which was good and informative. And aside from that, I drafted 1 or 2 documents and had a good chat with Marco De Leon from the Park Service. I think he reached out to all of us just to talk about the reservation system and the pause. So I found that conversation very helpful. And other than that, I've been feeding farm animals, so I'll try not to drop hay everywhere because I'm not sure my shower was very effective.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah, first of all, David, at a Moab Area Watershed Partnership meeting, Arnie Hultquist told us about a funded study. Forgive me because I don't know, not sure who's funding the study, but the great bulk of tens of thousands of dollars was being paid for by somebody else. The study is about vulnerable consequences of something or other, but it's all about drought and climate change and its impact on water supply. So the study would be a great thing to have on our plate, digested by the time the groundwater management plan rolls around, maybe a year from now. So Arnie was asking 5 different organizations to cough up another $1,500. That was a local each. That was a local match, I guess. So I took the liberty saying, yeah, sure, David got plenty of money. So anyway, I hope that works for you. If not, it doesn't. We'll talk about it later on. Anyway, it'd be money well spent, I think. My wife is gone now, but she...
Wait, so are you suggesting something in the budget in that
Yeah.
way? Okay.
Yeah, it's a budget line item. That'd be great, thank you. For
us to consider.
For this coming, yeah. And my wife wanted me to thank you, to thank Jim Winder, to thank his troops for a quick and effective response. There was some rowdy teenage kids on Main Street a few days ago, and she knows one of the business owners well, and the kids were quite a little stirred. But anyway, she did call in the police. They were there within a couple of minutes and handled the situation very well. So the business owner was grateful for such a fine and quick response. So good for Jim and his folks. Laurel Hagan was here. This is a little closer to my heart because I'm also on the board of Moab Irrigation Company. The idea is to try to keep water more fully in the creek, even during the summer times, during the daytime. And if so, that opens up the notion of maybe riparian trails that people could use if they want to walk down there. So that's way down the road. If we can find the water, that's a whole nother subject. I also participated in the phone call with Marco de Leon and Kate Cannon, and where he explained what was going on with the reservation system. And I personally was bummed. I think the business concerns are highly overblown, but we won't get into that. And I told him this as well, you know, if it's just a way of putting off doing anything about it, it certainly will be effective. So that was my take on it. Also, there's an HB 224 study committee. I sat in on that. It was interesting to meet all those players. That's the form of government. Walt Dabney, who's also my neighbor and one of the principals in that committee, told me, and I'm telling you guys, that if you have opinions on how you'd like to see the county government reorganize and in what 4 forms, be sure to let the study committee know, because they're supposed to be responsible to that. So it's not like they're working in the dark. So you, the public, get out there and let them know what you'd like to see. I put in a plug, obviously, for something like we do here for a variety of reasons. That's about it.
Thank you, Mike.
I too attended the joint meeting with John Curtis, and because of that, I missed the museum board meeting, so I don't have an update there. The Housing Authority moved their meeting to Thursday night instead of last Thursday because they didn't have a quorum. So, and I attended, prior to the change of government meeting, the county held an ethics class given by one of the Salt Lake deputy attorneys. I believe it was in response to a resolution that the county attorney drafted, but it might not hurt us to look at some of the new state statutes and some of the things that have changed in regard to declarations and conflicts. I think we've been doing better at it than we thought we had, but it still might be worth looking at some further declarations. And I just want to take advantage of my little platform here that I have.
Oh, I love this.
Over the past few weeks, I have heard from several people and on several different platforms and some very disparaging comments about some of the artwork that's in town. I'd like to remind people that all art is subjective. Not everybody is going to like the same piece and like the same music and like the same genre, But these artists share this artwork with us. Some of them donate it, some of it's consigned, but whatever they do, they have put their heart into it, and it's important to them. Each piece is unique, and we don't know, unless we've spoken to that artist, if that is an expression of grief, if that is an expression of loss, if it's an expression of a trauma that they have survived. So I would just like to ask us as a community to be a little bit kinder about the pieces that are around town. If you don't like them, nobody's going to make you put them in your house. But they don't belong in a garbage bin, and they don't deserve to be trashed. And please, do not vandalize them. That's it.
Well said.
Thanks, Tony.
I attended the Landmark Advisory Committee group, and I just wanted to point out that the end goal for the land use plan is to have a solid ordinance for our moratorium, and a fluidity between the county and the city, and what we're trying to accomplish with zoning tools and striking the right balance between tourism and residents. And don't forget, you can show up tomorrow, 11:30 to 1:30, to attend your input discussion here at the chamber. I've held quite a few art committees with myself and one other person, and actually getting some help from Liz and Makeda from the Mark. We're looking at a potential collaboration to get some art for the airport through some city means, not financial, just through their connections. And I went to the chamber luncheon with Emily, and something that struck me, one of the speakers was the Red Rock four-wheelers, and I just wanted to give them some props because they mentioned that they are closing an area on Fins and Things in the Slick Rock area because of so much use. And I was really impressed that they are keeping tabs of the usage of Jeeps and motorized vehicles up in Sand Flats area, and are willing to close it down for revegetation because it's an important asset for them. I attended the Grand County Council meeting to support and give input on the night sky ordinance. Also to support Kalen because he's done a ton of work on that, and I think it's really important. Something that was interesting that I found, the criminal court numbers are up in Grand County, and methamphetamine and heroin use numbers have expanded more than they had projected for this last 6 months. And then I attended the Mill Creek meeting, which is a collaborative management project to figure out the ecosystem and habitat and recreation uses at Powerhouse. So at this last meeting, we were defining zones and planning boundaries. So if you would like to get involved, please, hopefully we can put it on our website to contact Betsy Byrne with the National Park Service, and then you'll receive a survey eventually. So yeah, that's what I have done.
Thanks, Karen.
I went to several meetings that many of you were at that you've already reported on. I also attended a solid waste board meeting, as well as several smaller gatherings and work gatherings. And the new district manager and the staff are continuing to make progress with keeping the recycling center and the landfills cleaner than they've been in quite a while. I would say the biggest news to me as a board member and treasurer is that our facilities manager has critically reviewed the condition of all the heavy equipment that we rely on to do the job, and the overall state is not particularly good, from non-functional to has issues with 2 pieces of equipment that are like fully functional. So that's likely to have significant budgetary implications soon. And then shortly after receiving that news, the compactor up at Klondike required $27,000 in repairs. And it's a critical piece of equipment for, not something we can just dally about what the best options are, because we've got to have that functional.
Yeah. He did present at the CIB meeting, and while he wasn't ranked in the top 5, those that were ranked in the top 5 have been on the list for a while. So continue to encourage him to participate in that CIB process.
Okay, good. Yeah, I also attended the county council meeting, at which they had their public hearing on the outdoor lighting ordinance, item Z. They have long meetings too. I think I arrived at 8 thinking it was close, but then spending close to an hour before, as they worked through. They had council reports late, and they had a lot to report on, so it was good to just attend and like sit in the audience with another one of the local governments.
And then what was the result of their?
They didn't vote. I mean, they typically don't vote unless it's a
public hearing.
Pressing issue. And so they leave it open. The formal period for public comment closes tomorrow. Okay. But despite the late hour, it was well attended and largely positive.
And what would be the impact on Moab City?
We are pursuing outdoor lighting ordinances, outdoor lighting codes that are almost identical because they were developed in collaboration. Jeff Reinhardt was like presented the first version, and then he was active on the committee. And so what's before our planning commission is almost identical to what the county council is considering. So presuming both of us pass something like that, then it'll help bring our codes into alignment, and as well as achieving all the benefits of that in terms of avoiding light trespass, the public health benefits, the safety benefits of reducing glare and increasing the visibility of the actual areas that are intended to be illuminated, as well as preserving night skies and conserving energy.
Thanks, Kaylin.
Yeah.
We are now in section 5, administrative reports. David, city manager.
Good evening. I just have a couple of smaller items for you. I attended the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting as a staff member for the city last, it was almost 2 weeks ago, and it was a very enjoyable experience. And the lighting ordinance was discussed and made subsequent revisions based on the conversation at the Planning Commission, and it'll be a public hearing at not the meeting on Thursday, but the first meeting in April for them. So that's exciting, as Kaylin was talking about. And there were a couple of other items on that agenda, one of which you'll be discussing tonight. As you all may know, the gym had some indigestion recently and got a little backed up, as they say. We had a significant sewer backup into the basement of the gym, which necessitated closing the gym for a little bit. But Joel and the Public Works crew moved quickly to get some emergency toilet facilities out on the front there with hand washing stations. So they scrambled and got that done really quickly because there was a giant volleyball tournament that came into town, and was nowhere else for the volleyballers to play the volleyball. So the gym had to be open, and thus it was. And so that was a good thing in that it got done, but it is a heads up to you all that we're probably looking at a pretty significant repair / fix on that at some point here that could be, getting close to 6 figures potentially. It's pretty bad. So more details on that as it comes. As they say. The budget has pretty much been the only thing I've been thinking about and working on the last couple of weeks. And some of you are scheduled for some budget workshops with staff on next Monday. We're going to get you plugged in, I think, a week later if possible when you're back. And then we're excited to have you sit down with us as staff and get a preview and be able to ask some questions right there. And then we'll have the official budget initial briefing for the whole council on the 9th. Very exciting. Good times. A little preview there is the revenue trends are plateauing, I think it's fair to say. So we'll be talking about that a lot. And then the last thing
is that just because of good snow?
No, it's been sort of we've been on that kind of curve of 7, 8, 9% for a while, and it's really slowing down and has been looks like over the last maybe 4 or 5 months. So even prior to winter, we were seeing a little bit of a shallowing of that increase. So to be expected at some point. So more to come. And then I think Chuck was going to speak to you briefly about a few items to update from the world of engineering, if he is here. Yes.
Thanks,
presenting
Chuck. Oscar would be mad if I didn't do a drum.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Oscar's happy.
He is, broken arm and all.
Left or right?
Left, fortunately. Amazing hospital and hospital staff.
Good luck. Good evening. I was going to give you an update on the 100 West project. As you know, we're behind schedule because of several reasons. One is the wet, cold winter. Lost a lot of days when you just couldn't work, and when you could work, we worked very slowly. Also, the abundance of unknown underground utilities. And also, we took the opportunity to replace some of our failing infrastructure that was discovered in places as the project progressed. And we wanted to, put in new water lines, abandon old water lines, and come up with better systems so that we wouldn't have to do it after the new paving is in, right? Because we're hoping for a 5-year, we informed all the utilities that we're looking for a 5-year pavement moratorium. We're going to try and hope that happens. So the gas company has gone in and put in utilities and in preparation for their expansion, as they thought they needed it and such, and Moab Irrigation knows about it. So that's one of the why we've been delayed. It's kind of a series of things, but the good news is we started paving today. And we are paving 3 inches of asphalt in two 1.5-inch lifts is the way to do that. So today we got 90% done with the portion of the project that'll be paved with lift number 1. So with luck, and we think we'll get done with the paving tomorrow. If not, we might drift into Thursday morning, but then the paving will be done. Then we'll also move into striping, we hope, next week for the project.
That's great.
Yeah, and we won't do the reverse angle back in park. So, and we hope the entire project, so I'll come back to that one. So after that, then what will be remaining is to finish some of the sidewalk, shared use path. Need some signage that'll go up.
Shared use path I was curious about that as well, like when the concrete and the path would be open.
Yeah, we're hoping to have the entire project done by April 10th, prior to Jeep Safari.
Okay.
So as soon as this paving's done, really the only big part that needs to be poured is out there in front of Zach's parking lot, and they'll pour that from the parking lot so they don't have the concrete trucks running our new asphalt. So we'll install the signage, and we're not going to, talking with Lisa, we've kind of come up with a plan that we're not going to do the reverse angle parking until after Jeep Safari. We just think that would be too much for too many people to catch on, because we're going to have a public relations campaign, been working with Lisa Napa. So we'll have temporary tabs in to establish the old until after Jeep Safari, which is, ends like Easter,
21st.
21st, so I think we said the 29th. You'll see the new stuff, because we ordered the signs and everything. We're preparing to do that. I'm just letting you know when you see the striping, why you don't go, wait, I thought we were gonna do this. It'll be pushed back a couple of weeks.
Thank you for reporting that.
Yeah. And again, we're hoping for final closeout by April 10th. And kind of quickly, if I may, on Mill Creek West, which is the road up to the USU campus, that's also ongoing. It was also impacted by the wet weather with some weather days and such, so we're a little behind schedule. But the sewer line's installed, the water line is installed, they were putting in the pressure release valve today. The conduit for future power and communications to the campus is installed in the utility trench. We've been working with USU to make sure that they got what they needed there. Most of the drainage is installed. Next up, we'll be actually starting to build up the road, bringing in the subgrade and then the road base, and then ultimately we'll go to concrete work and paving. Right now, we're on track for completion by July 4th. So pretty close to our original schedule. It's drifted.
Will there be fireworks?
That would be an executive decision.
Yes, there would.
And if council or any members of council would like to visit the site, if you'd let me know, I'd be happy to arrange a visit. There's a lot of heavy equipment moving around up there, so I wouldn't want you to go up there on your own. You know, I can't make you not do that, but we have the road closed to the public right now because there's a lot of equipment moving. But if you want to go up there and see where this site is, you can see where the site is now. I mean, the road is up to there, it's dirt and everything, so be happy to try and arrange that. If anybody wants to go up, let me know.
So Chuck, you mentioned the utility trench, so when USU does build up there, will they have to do any excavation in order to install it, or is it all?
No, so what we do is we put in 5 different conduits between 2 inches and 6 inches, and all of them have dedicated purposes. Okay. So what happens is our contractor puts in the conduit, covers up the trench, and then the power company will pull their wire through for electricity. USU will have their contractor pull in for their communications, and they have their own system, communications and fiber optics. So no, they won't have to cut up.
So you won't have to expose anything again?
Nope.
Expose anything again?
No, sir.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Joel, would you mind coming up and giving a quick, sorry, I just took a little bite of cookie, how unprofessional. Give us an update regarding Greg Fosse.
You want me? Okay.
No.
So without my notes, Greg Fosse was awarded the Rural Plant Operator of the Year award for Moab City for the state of Utah. I think it was March 1st he was given that. So they had him come down to St. George. They had a big banquet where they gave awards to several operators throughout the state for different reasons. But Greg was recognized for what he does for the city down to our water treatment facility. And he was given the Operator of the Year award. And he got a plaque and was all smiles. And it was a pretty neat experience for him. So at some point we should have him on the agenda and have him come in here and show you what he got and go from there. So yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks for reporting, and thanks for being down there to support him as well.
No problem.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
There you are, Greg.
Okay, moving right along to citizens to be heard. I've got 2 forms. Jen Patterson. Hi, and welcome.
Forgive me, I'm really nervous.
Whatever you do, don't picture us naked.
No worries there. Hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I won't take up much of your time. My name is Jen Patterson. I'm the chair of the Moab Charter School Board, and I have come to you this evening with a formal request for a crossing guard to assist the school children who cross 400 East on their way to and from Moab Charter School. In the mornings, besides contending with the local everyday traffic, Our extended tourist season means many visitors to Moab are in a rush to begin their adventures and are not aware of the crosswalk or even of the speed limit. In the afternoons, the children cross from the east side of the road at the south edge of Dixie Park to the west side at the Milt's parking lot to access the Locust Lane neighborhood and Mill Creek. Because of the parking along the east side of the street, the children are very difficult to see until a driver is almost right upon the crosswalk itself. And the children are often really impatient to cross, sometimes darting out into the street. This combination of hurrying kids, poor visibility, and heavy traffic makes for a very dangerous crosswalk because there is no guard there to manage the flow of traffic on the street or the kids trying to cross it. As many of you probably remember, there used to be a crossing guard at that walk when Red Rock Elementary was in operation right up the street on Mill Creek. So there is a precedent for this safety measure. This need has been met before, and it can be met again. In your packets, which I hope that's okay, you'll find Moab Charter School's Safe Routes to School Plan, which used to be called by a different name, the SNAP Plan. It was required by UDOT, and the Safety Committee and I put it together. And the relevant data from the most recent traffic count done at that crosswalk on 400 East in September of last year. If we conducted that same traffic count in May, there would be a huge increase in the numbers. But already, just in September, it surpasses the threshold of need for a crossing guard. Upon consideration of this information, you'll see that the absence of a guard at this crosswalk is a real public safety issue with a demonstrable need. Finally, because I understand that deliberation can take time, I request your consideration of a temporary crossing guard at this crosswalk for the weeks before and after Jeep Safari. That would be April 8th through 12th and 22nd through 26th. Many schools throughout Utah and the West have their spring breaks in those weeks, and the traffic on 400 East increases exponentially, along with aggressive, hurried, distracted, reckless, and even impaired driving. Shocking, I know. During those weeks and until the end of the school year in May, it's horrifying to see children trying to make their way across that walk. A crossing guard at this crosswalk will prevent a tragedy which, with the enormous increase in Moab's vehicle-based tourism, I fear may be inevitable unless we take this step to ensure the crosswalk safety of all elementary school children in Moab. Thank you for this time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or if you want me to go away,
well, we're going to keep going with our public comments, but thank you so much. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Can I ask one quick question? So, Jen, I'm just looking right here on the 28th of September from 3 to 3:59, 669 vehicles?
Yes, in September. Just between those two times of day, between 3 and 5.
Wow, and so that's on 400 that you guys took that count, or is that in front of the
Yes, it's right
school?
there between Dixie Park and the Milt's parking lot. That's where that crosswalk is. And that's the one that most of the students who walk, scooter, or ride their bikes use.
Because when my daughter and son went to the charter school, the street in front of the school, not on 400.
300 South.
300 South is wicked dangerous as well.
It is.
And that, you have all that parking.
They did lower the speed limit on 300 South recently, and that, I think, has helped. Plus, I am seeing an increased police presence, which is also really nice, but 400 East remains a pretty bad problem.
Okay, we're going to move on, but I know you have a lot of questions.
Sorry.
So can Karen contact you too?
Of course,
Okay,
please.
to follow up.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody who has any questions, or concerns about this, I'm very happy to.
We're not supposed to do this. Can I ask a really 101 sort of
We're not supposed to do this, and we're not going to do this, but you can email her a question, and I'm cutting you both off. No.
Mayor, can our city manager say something? He had something to
What
say.
the heck?
I pulled.
Is this a mutiny?
No. It seems like
All right, fine. Speak.
All I was going to say was that we have some new speed control, speed measurement and signs that we could probably put there, at least in a temporary, nothing else that I could deploy. So
I wouldn't dare ask a question.
You
after
may,
all
if,
that.
I mean, it's
I know.
over now.
I mean,
It's
we're talking about real
chaos.
basics here, but I'll write her.
What is your contact so that we can get in touch with you?
Right, yeah.
It's in
We have
here.
it. Okay.
I hope that's okay.
Jen, thank you so
I
much.
hate to give you more papers, but
Thank you so much.
thanks.
Sarah Melnikoff.
I wanted to talk about recycling, but first I wanted to mention something about Mill Creek. If someone were to film in there, they'd have to get a film permit, and you're not permitted to reveal the location according to the Mill Creek Management Plan. So if someone were to go in and try to advertise it by filming, they wouldn't be permitted to disclose the location. So, I
Oh,
don't
that's in
know.
regards to what, Emily?
Yes.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know if people would abide by it or not. With a very, very heavy heart, I'm here to talk about the recycling situation. It's worse than I thought it was going to be as far as all the bins being green tagged, which means they're not being picked up. They have contamination in them. And my experience from 12 years of trying to get the city to allow me to train a city worker in maintenance of recycling is not passive. I've been saying that forever. So I am willing to go out with the city worker, go to all the recycle bins. I can show them in 5 minutes, and I will even help them. As soon as you take the contaminants out, they're going to reappear unless the city gets someone to maintain those bins. Lions Park, Swanee Park, Rotary Park, some on Main Street, they all have green tags on them. Sea Cave, I've been hauling so much recycling to the center. I'm up there every day with my friends, with my neighbors, with a lot of the nonprofits. Sea Cave got green tagged. They didn't even know what it meant. So I took one of the shelter managers over and showed her. I emptied the entire bin, put stuff in my truck by type, threw out the diapers and the trash with the food in it. And they don't want the bin anymore because they're not going to have time to deal with it. So it's a tragedy to put a bin out and have the public expect that it's going to be recycled. It's a sin against nature to then throw it away. And that's not reducing any carbon footprint at all. And then even the stuff that goes to Denver, which is a huge distance, and then to Asian countries, that's a double whammy. And it's just a shame. I am willing, if you guys have a public works person, and I've worked with some of them that love recycling, I will put my gloves on, get my tarp, and show them how to empty the contaminants out if you're going to do it single stream. And if they just keep piling up, you're going to have to throw it out. What are you going to do with them? They haven't been emptied. They all have green tags, and they're going to keep getting filled up. They're going to overflow. So it's a really bad situation. I kind of tried to warn about it. Nobody listens. So anyway, I am open to that if you guys want to, contact someone in Public Works. I'll go around to all the bins in the city.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep. Don't take long.
So we are moving right along to presentations for the patient middle schoolers. Please join me up front. Thank you for being so patient. Gosh, what are we doing here? Okay. So, let's center ourselves here. Let's scooch up, just in case they start taking your photos. Whereas the staff and faculty of Grand County Middle School on a monthly basis select students of the month based on the student's citizenship and their involvement within their school. And whereas it is the desire of the city of Moab to foster and recognize the contributions of the young people of this community in regards to good citizenship. Now, therefore, the City of Moab joins with Grand County Middle School in recognizing Ray Swalling as the 8th grade student of the month and Lorena Miner as the 7th grade student of the month as outstanding students, positive role models, and shining examples for our community. Therefore, I, Emily S. Niehaus, Mayor of the City of Moab, do hereby proclaim them Students of the Month. Congratulations. And we dropped the mic. That's awesome. Congratulations. There you go. Thank you. I need quite a student to care for the microphone. Oh, hold on, you're not done yet. There's a pin so you can wear your pin like me. And should we take a photograph? One more now. Congratulations. Good job. Thanks for being awesome. All right, so we are moving right along, and if you want to stay for this meeting and continue to stay and listen to all of this fun stuff, you can. Otherwise, you can go ahead. This is a great time to... I'm sorry. Hold on. Kari, please come up. I forgot. I rushed right through it because you probably have something really... Come back up. Sorry, guys. Come back up. You probably have something special to share, and I'm so sorry.
You know, I do have something special to share. Both of these kiddos are super awesome, so I'll share quickly, but it is their moment to shine. So Race, the 8th grade student of the month, quietly and competently goes down to business and accomplishes everything he needs to do, and he's very thoughtful, and he shares his thoughtful comments with his peers and gives great insight to everybody. The interesting thing on here is that Race's favorite places are Mexico and Iowa. He loves to play sports, especially soccer. And this is what it says, boy, can he ever do backflips. Race's advice is stay on top of your work, which we could probably all use. Okay, Lorena? Okay, I always say it wrong. She was chosen by her teachers for multiple reasons. She is helpful to her teachers and her peers, and she takes initiative in her classes. She's a hard worker, never hesitating to join in-class discussion. And both of these two are always smiling in the halls, which makes for a great place to be at Grand County Middle School. Lorena, what's interesting is that at one point she had 24 cats. Her advice is, I know, being kind gets more friends than enemies. So these two are wonderful examples of Grand County Middle School students. Thank you.
Okay, now you can leave. I'm so sorry. Congratulations, parents, too. Okay, so we are now, there are no items under special events, so we are at section 9 on our agenda, old business, 9.1, resolution 20-2019, approving the City of Moab 2019-2020 administrative work plan, briefing and possible action. So what we're gonna do is, what I'd like to do is just go section by section. There are 7 sections. If we've got suggestions on how we would like to, anything we'd like to add or remove or amend, we can do it by section, if that's all right. And then we can conclude with general comments. Does that sound like an efficient way to go through the work plan? Probably worth it to note that this was something that we developed when we had our council retreat back in sometime before today. Gosh, what was it? February.
In February.
And it's March now, so yes. So David's just gonna pull up our, the draft, and we'll just go through section by section.
Awesome. The only thing I would add is that this is the second year of doing this, right? And this document builds on or is an evolution of last year's version. You all crossed a few things off the list when we went through this process, and this document, I did my best to reflect your intent and comments from the council meeting based on my notes taken there. So we'll just go from there. The other thing I just really quickly want to make sure you're all aware of is under the citywide tracking document, Team Drive, there is a place where it's called Work Plan Tracking, and it's the one for the current year, but it has a lot, probably more, maybe some more detail around like what has happened and status reports and that kind of thing of all these items. So, that will need to be updated as well once this document is finalized. And that really does help drive the budgeting process to the degree it's possible. I think the really important thing to always recognize, and maybe I'm a little broken record on this though, is that a lot of the things that are in here are great, but they're all in addition to the daily functioning of the city government, most of which is not overly, it's a lot of things that we don't usually talk about. And so it's just always important to recognize this is above and beyond in a lot of ways what people are doing in daily work in the city. And that's great. It's good to have a balance of the things you're working on to make sure the city functions on a day-to-day basis, but also look at, continually improving and evolving how we do business. Having said that, you all said you wanted to move this quality of life, kind of cross-jurisdictional initiative section to the front, to the fore, and so that's where it's at now. Comments, questions, concerns, compliments?
I have a general comment, and this is even above the section level. I'm wondering if it would be possible to indicate when these items first get onto the work plan, so that we can see from year to year if they're rollover or not. Because as it is, it's like they just roll over. And at the same time, I'd also like to maybe sometime during the work plan drafting process, or possibly at the time of budget adoption, to formally acknowledge everything that's been accomplished and celebrate that and things coming off the list, because sometimes I feel like maybe they creep off during the course of the year, and it'd be great to say, look what we did in the last budget year. So, and I realize that I do look at the tracking sheets, as you've probably noticed occasionally. And I appreciate the more granular analysis that happens there. But then this is kind of what we as the council refer to in our priority setting. So that's my request.
So it's
Two
like a
requests.
timestamp?
Yes, timestamp from when they come on, and then around the transition between budget years and the acknowledgement of what's been accomplished and what's coming off the list.
And because this is year 2, that probably isn't too difficult to do, because the final section, so section 8 could even be done list. Probably a better header than that, but.
I did report out in October. I think if you remember, we did a big work plan update, remember? And that was, we at least talked about, I thought, where we were at and status and that kind of thing. But I hear you saying, try to sync these up timing-wise a little bit better in terms of the process.
Yeah, but I realize that there needs to be some disparity, just because one informs the narrative informs the budget.
Right.
So then anything we added this year would get the timestamp of this year. Anything that's carried over from last year. You could even color code if you wanted to do it that way. I don't know if that's too much of a pain, but however you want to delineate that, I think that's, well, because then what that would show us is, gosh, that's been there for 3 years. We need to make that happen. Is that where you're going with that comment?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's been on here a while. Why isn't this getting finished? Or what are the subtasks that are getting accomplished? And also part of this is to like moderate our expectations about what's going to happen with discretionary capacity. And so I feel like part of what I also want our administrative work plan as regards to discretionary items to be realistic.
Yes.
And it seems like if there's a lot that keeps rolling over, then like that helps it be a check on us and what our expectations are. And possibly like it also, like by having more on here than we can really get done, it kind of gets us out of making the hard decisions about what our priorities are.
Yeah. Okay, well, that sounds good. So then should we go back to section 1 and any more specific
Well, can I just get real quick clarification on that? Did you want me to time or date stamp these, try to do them retroactively? In other words, like that first one I think first came up a year ago. Do you want me to try to say like February?
That was January 17th.
January 2017.
Yeah, because everything's
like
going to
that.
have either last year's date or this year's date, right?
Then February 9th is our observatory time.
Yeah.
So I can do that throughout.
And then anything done would be put on the done list. Because you're right, a done list feels pretty good. Okay. So section 1, any edits, comments, section 1?
The only thing I might offer, Caitlin, is I agree in part, but some of these topics strike me as one-time kind of things, and others seem to be more the sort of things that are going to come up year after year after year. And so it might make sense to kind of try to date what's happened on some things more than others, I guess is what I'm trying to say. For example, dark skies initiatives. All right, so if we consider the closing part of that to be passing of an ordinance,
Yeah, implement.
then yeah, you could tag that and hopefully this puppy would disappear next year unless you want to replace this with monitor progress with implementation of dark sky ordinance kind of thing.
Yep.
So that's more of a one-shot sort of thing. Whereas legislative strategy with Grand County, well, we're going to be doing that till the day we die. I mean, so what is it you'd like David to say, I guess is my question.
Which was the second one, sorry?
Coordinate
legislative strategy with Grand County. I mean, what exactly would you like David to say?
Actually, those items are pretty specific to a year timeline. But that's a good point. So if it's fuzzy, I guess timestamp it, and we'll just know when we're going through, like, some things just might happen every year and some things might not. But I really want to move on and just try to get really section 1. Like, those are good suggestions. Let's move on.
So, Mayor, I have a question because on the shared document, I mean, Kayla and I both had a lot of questions or points when we were reading both over it. So do you want to spend the time now going through each one of those so we can get this done? Or do you want us to revisit this at the next meeting so that David has a chance to, I mean, because it's going to take a while to go through these. I mean, I don't know if you saw on the shared document. I just want to make sure that's what you want to do.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I thought that because we've got 7 sections that I don't know that anybody would oppose corrections or additions or revisions that either of you have. But if we do think, what does this council think? If we do think, like, give David some time to work in the suggestions and then
I'm
just
fine
bring it
either
back.
way. I just, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, because I don't think that I necessarily oppose any comments or changes. Does anybody else feel that way? Because, I mean, I would be fine to revisit it at the next council meeting rather than going through line by line and in things that we probably all pretty much agree on.
So, Mayor, you're just talking about, we could ask David to create as a shared document, this thing here. We can all put our 2 bits in on it. course, that's what you just did, isn't it? I mean, come to think of it.
Yes. I'm just shaking my head because this happened last year. I wrote up a comment list because we didn't have a shared document. Then a shared document was created, like in some other format, like we commented on PDF, and I transferred my comments there. And then a Google Doc was created, and I had to transfer my comments the third time, and it was.
How was that?
I have resentment.
PTSD. So I'm happy with whatever.
Right, but I agree that is the most, for working on a document like this, that may be the most efficient method, and I'll get over it.
Could I say?
At least what you did was itemized your comments per section.
As opposed to just like stream of consciousness, one paragraph, one sentence.
Which is something I would probably do, so.
Well,
James Joyce, the city council.
I feel like that was sort of that was our that was kind of our trial and error version of doing that. We've gotten better.
Oh, for sure.
over the year, yay! Check that one off the list.
Yeah, move it to the done.
But
continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement. So we could either just take Kaylin's document and y'all could build on that, or we could go back.
Google Doc it.
Okay.
Google Doc it. Transfer your comments. Are you okay with that?
But I just put all mine in the comment field.
What's Adam's?
I'm just going to get through them right now.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I'll get that set up for the next time. I was so hopeful that all of your feedback had been part of the
Do we want to just go through it?
thing, but that's okay. We'll get it. This is important enough, and this is your chance to do this. So,
Well, David,
let's give David a chance to amend it. Let's review it before the next meeting, and then hopefully when we come together at the next meeting, it'll be something that we're ready to pass right away.
But David, I'd like to add, I'm happy. I'm not nearly as critical as Kaylin is on this one. I mean, I think the vast majority is just fine. Yes, you did try to pick up what people said at the thing, and I would take issue with Kaylin as making this is, in a sense, the most important thing we do around here, because that hasn't been my experience. My experience is that issues come up like the moratorium, for example, or PED, or any one of the number of controversial issues that come in front of us. That's where I spend my time. In other words, I'm fighting more immediate battles, I guess, and that's, so it's great to keep all this in mind, but if he doesn't follow it, it's not the end of the world.
Well, I mean,
if he doesn't budget for our priorities, they don't get done.
Don't get done.
Yeah.
And when you give David comments, whatever document we choose to use, make sure they're clear. Make sure you've given him clear instruction as to how you want it to read or what you want it to say.
I think I attempted to do that in
I think you
some
did.
cases.
No,
I may not
I
have.
didn't mean that you weren't. I think you did. It's just if five of us giving him instruction, it kind of has to mesh somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Well, and what's important for me is to know that if Kaylin puts a comment up there that you all either tacitly or explicitly approve or disagree, and that's where it gets a little murky sometimes for us in the staff world. Is like, oh yeah, a couple councilors took the initiative, nobody else responded. Does that mean it's cool?
Before our next meeting, if any comment sits wrong, disagree. Okay. Otherwise, if a comment's in there, it's going to get folded into
silence
the work
is assent.
Yeah, because honestly, I mean, you'll see in my comments, I wasn't sure like if some of this stuff was just side comments or if we'd actually agreed to it, because I thought I could sit there and listen to 7 hours again, but I couldn't in this period of time anyway. And I figured you had kind of captured things. So some of my comments might be memories where I was in my own world, but for some of the other ones, I was just curious if they may have already been covered and I might have missed it, but some of them I was just hoping they could be added.
Right on.
So when it goes into the master document, anybody can say, I hate that, feel free.
All right, thank you.
Can we discuss, I can cherry pick just a few items that I do kind of want feedback and possible clarification from David on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there were a number of items on the sustainability plan, on the sustainability section, and it's kind of been pared down to create a 10-year sustainability plan, which is a rollover item. And I'm unclear how, and then I see on the future agenda items that the a workshop on the sustainability plan keeps like being just like 1 or 2 meetings away and keeps getting bumped. And so it's not clear to me, like, I would like this council to have the opportunity formally as a group to review the priorities and bless them or amend them, and then like somehow get the top level items onto the quality of life section, and so that they get funded. And it's a little bit of a black box for me, like what's going on in this building, and I don't know if this is the appropriate venue to talk about it, or, but.
When you asked Rosemarie today, what'd she say?
Well, I kind of, if you'll see, I got kind of 2 different messages. I felt like one that was what she posted on the agenda doc in response to my comments, which you may or may not have had time to see.
Just that yeah, she's working on it, it's taking some time.
Right, but my understanding is that we need those priorities. Like, we can't, if we let perfection be the enemy of the good, then they won't make it onto this list and they won't get budgeted. And so I kind of look to you to help like facilitate that happening, but I know you have a number of reports and limited time, and I'm not sure how much to talk about this in a public meeting.
Well, I think that this 10-year plan is something that it is truly a 10-year plan, you know, and there are things that I think we, you know, that Rosemarie and I have discussed in terms of an immediate budget ask that probably would fit in, you know, and I've tried to integrate those in to the degree possible with this budget that's coming your way. But I haven't really pushed her to get that done ahead of this budget process, just because my sense is it is a 10-year plan. It's not, and whenever it gets done, I want to be able to take the time with it first and have it be internally vetted as well to the degree we need to, and so that when it comes to you, we're really ready. And I just, we're just not there yet. Is really the answer. And yeah. And yes, in an ideal world, you know, we'd have certain sequences of things, but we really just are where we are in terms of documents and prep and the budget schedule.
Right. But so it seems like there are items in what was 3.1 under the sustainability plan that I don't have the impression that are really, I mean, I don't think, if there's baseline data for community-wide emissions inventory, I'm not sure where that is. I mean, I know that there's information from the WattSmart program about the electricity use, but I'm not sure, like, so, okay, so are we going to get some line item priorities under sustainability, even if we don't have the 10-year sustainability plan?
In the budget?
Yeah, in the work plan.
In the work plan, as it's structured now, no, but if you want to add some in, we can certainly do that. I think I was trying to simplify it a little bit, and
so what if
we
did this? Because I think I understand what you're saying, Kaylin. That perhaps while a 10-year sustainability plan would otherwise fall under quality of life, are you proposing, or maybe I'm proposing, another section that would be potentially sustainability? Then whatever is developed in the 10-year sustainability plan could be items, so that there are specific items that we know will specifically get funded.
Yes, I mean, more generally, I have the sense that we have higher aspirations for sustainability than we funded so far.
Yeah.
But we have competing demands, and so I need some help, like figuring out, like, what are the priorities? What can we fund this year that's realistic?
And you really want to itemize those things in this work plan for this year? So whether it's a new section or just an expanded section 1.2 that has several points?
Well, or I mean, or maybe you could just allocate a certain amount of money that above what we have in the past, but actual spending will be determined based on priorities established through the 10-year plan and
That's an interesting idea.
assent of the council.
I mean, at the end of the day, right, sustainability, and I'm sure the sustainability plan is going to have priorities and, places to spend money that are throughout this whole plan.
Yeah, and
right?
I was going to say that. I have noticed that the places where they do mesh. And
Yeah, I mean, whether it's
cross categories.
Absolutely, right? I mean, a great example is, doing the retro commissioning of the buildings to figure out how to make them more energy. That's a facilities project, right? But it's driven by this desire to meet some sustainability goals. So, shared use pathway. I mean, so I would maybe suggest that a sustainability plan is going to inform the whole thing. It's not, its own section, really. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, this idea of set aside or maybe some as of yet identified or finalized, particularly energy related projects, I could see that working. Although, things are
like solar buildings
tight.
or
yes, precisely.
maybe because in water, there's water education for reduction. I mean, that seems like a sustainability effort as well.
Yeah, one thing that Rachel did in coordination with Rosemarie was go establish a couple of places in the budget that were specific for Rosemarie projects, I guess you could say, sustainability related projects. They weren't huge numbers, but she's doing a lot of things with the Green to Gold program that does take some money for incentives and I won't say prizes, but awards and recognition. And so that's part of it, right? Yeah. Even though it's not saving, we can't really say, oh, that saved well, I guess actually in some cases you can say that's like equivalent to this amount of CO2 in the air and that kind of thing. So I think some of that you'll see that in the budget coming up, but we're not waiting for a formal 10-year plan to start doing not a lot, but some things moving forward for sure. So
all right, so where are we landing with this? Because we should probably move on.
Yeah.
Where are we landing with this? How are we gonna? What's the direction?
I guess I'd appreciate a little bit more clarity about what those set-asides might be focused on. I don't know if it's possible to have sort of a preliminary workshop on the 10-year sustainability plan with us, and maybe we could just get an overview and start thinking about it and.
Before we pass the administrative work plan, or?
No, but maybe sooner than Rosemarie gets peer review. Maybe we'd.
So the budget-wise, Kaylin, the only thing.
Okay, but hold on, wait.
I'm trying to figure out how do we get through this.
Yeah. I don't think that a workshop is going to happen in the next 2 weeks.
No, I'm not asking. No.
But that is a good ask to maybe kind of a brief, maybe at our next council meeting about where we are with the 10-year sustainability plan.
Great.
And in the meantime, with the administrative work plan and specifically this sustainability 10-year 1.2, how do you want to settle with direction to David?
I think I'm comfortable now, having had this conversation.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing your passion about sustainability, because it's putting your money where your mouth is.
Yes.
Running on, the platform of sustainability, and here's where the rubber hits the road, so good work.
Thank you for taking the time for that.
Yeah. So what other, sorry, Mike, I keep interrupting you. Go ahead. I apologize.
One place I know where Rosemarie would like to have a little money, because Cara and the City Water Advisory Board have been talking about this education campaign. They've got it all plotted out by months, what topics we're going to, so it involves social media and little flyers, and Lisa would get involved, and so set aside a little bit of money to fund, you know, materials and mailings and that sort of thing. So I know that's one of the budget items that you could create a little money for in that regard.
But it's on there, it's 3.3 under water resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, are there any other substantial comments that anybody would like to make before we move on to the next agenda item?
As far as legislative coordination for the 2020 session, I'm under the impression that the 2020 session has effectively started a week ago in terms of their process.
Yeah.
And my impression from this council is that we would like to hire a lobbyist to represent our interests.
Yes.
Can we say that definitively and I thought we said that last year, that we wanted to explore that.
Move forward so that we have a lobbyist in place for at least interim session.
Yes.
If not.
But it sounds like, I mean, if we're going to try to pursue, like, be more proactive, then we need to get on it, like, soon. I mean, there's people plotting now.
They are. Yes, they are.
And it would be nice
about sales tax.
Yes, and that will be a major bummer for us, for the city. It gets through in a...
Is that direction clear?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Anything else? All right. We're moving on. Thanks for comments. So we'll continue to do it. And then you're going to create the Google Doc, and you're going to share it with us as a link. And then that's how we'll do it. And then it'll be put in the packet. Okay. All right. Moving on to new business. 10.1, Resolution 19-2019, a resolution urging the United States Congress to enact the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019, briefing and possible action. I've asked Ronnie to just give us a brief on the act.
Okay, well, I don't know if you guys remember, but last July, the council unanimously passed Resolution 32-2018, which was a resolution urging the U.S. Congress to levy a revenue-neutral fee on carbon and fossil fuels. And we now have legislation before the U.S. Congress that's bipartisan called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019. It's House Resolution 763. And communities and individuals, businesses, faith groups around the country are throwing support behind it to let their elected leaders know that they would like them to pass it. And so this resolution follows up on our previous one because now there's actually an act that we could ask Congress to support. So basically this would be urging Congress to support the act. And the resolution is long, but this is rather complicated stuff. So part of that is background, revisiting our previous resolution and some of the reasons for doing this specific to Moab, but then also kind of offering a little bit of picture of the science and the economic reasons and environmental, social behind this. So apologize for the length. I was going to basically read the introduction summary that's listed with the legislation, just because it might help and might be more eloquent than me. So basically, HR 763 imposes a fee on the carbon content of fuels, including crude oil, natural gas, coal, or any other product derived from those fuels that will be used so as to emit greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The fee is imposed on the producers or importers of the fuels. So as an example, if you're importing fuel from another country that doesn't have a carbon tax, we're gonna put the same, sorry, not a carbon tax, we're gonna put the same fee on it that producers in this country would have a fee on. So US producers don't lose any competitive edge there. So the fee is imposed on the producers or importers of the fuels and is equal to the greenhouse gas content of the fuel multiplied by the carbon fee rate that you're charging. And so the idea in this act is that you start charging a rate of $15 in 2019, assuming they pass the act in 2019, which would increase $10 per year, and that's on each ton of, to get the language right here, of emissions, basically. And so you start with the one rate, and the rate's going to go up and add $10 every year. And the idea is that you have those further price adjustments based on progress in meeting emission reduction targets. And just so you know, the goal and the target is to get greenhouse gas emissions to 90% below the 2015 levels. And at that point, the fees would have to be decommissioned, basically, when you reach that goal. Okay, yes, very complicated. Sorry, I was hoping we could have some anime or fun cartoons. And just for those real nerds in the audience, the bill also imposes a specified fee on fluorinated greenhouse gases. Because it's a bipartisan bill, and the attempt was to come to something that people on both sides of the aisle could agree on, I don't think it is going to meet the desires of everybody everywhere, but one of the things that needed to be in there for people to agree to support it on both sides was that it be revenue neutral, so that any money coming in from the fee is not basically raising government revenues. So the idea is while you're collecting this fee, the fees go into what they're calling a carbon dividend trust fund. And once you subtract a little bit of administrative money for that, it's supposed to be a maximum of 2%, you start paying out dividends to all U.S. citizens or lawful residents. Everybody gets the same amount, aside from folks under 19, and they get a half share. So the idea is you're basically trying to make things that produce greenhouse gases more expensive to encourage people to use less of them. The numbers that I read on this is all the studies they've done. This will basically end up saving 66%, 2/3 of households money. There will probably be 1/3 of the population, the example they always use is, if you've got 4 cars and 2 airplanes and, 3 speedboats, it's going to end up a little bit different possibly for you because, your gas is going to go up in price, and you might end up paying more than your neighbor who has, 1 car and a house and, 2 kids. But anyway, so this can get very geeky into detail, so you guys can ask questions and I'll see if I can answer them. But to get support on both sides, they also did some things where they exempted some industries that are using, say, diesel. Or so, for example, they have an exemption for fuels used for agriculture or non-emitting purposes. They have an exemption for fuels used by the armed forces. And then there are also rebates for facilities that capture and sequester carbon dioxide. And then, as I alluded to earlier, they have this border adjustment provision that will require certain fees or refunds for carbon-intensive products that are exported or imported. Let's see. Yeah.
That's probably that's okay. A pretty good description.
I mean, it is, there are umpteen questions and answers online, and I tried to start to master it, but boy, I think that'll take a few years.
Well, I'm grateful for your research and your knowledge base on this, and for you moving this forward for this council. So thank you for the effort and the description.
Yeah, and if anyone hasn't had a chance to look, there is information online of other supporters around the country. The bill currently has 24 sponsors. It is bipartisan, but I would say, full disclosure, the majority of the supporters are registered Democrats. If people have any curiosity about what kind of states we're talking about, Florida, which is apparently the state which has been identified in the U.S. to probably be the first impacted by climate change, or mostly partially because of location and the effects that warming waters will have on them. California, Illinois, Minnesota, Georgia, Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, Virginia, Maine, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Park City just passed in February a similar resolution, and also go online and look at similar communities that have passed it. So the idea was we could throw our support behind it as individuals or an entire council.
Okay. Well, Ronnie, thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for putting up with my attempt to explain.
Well, that was great. Is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 19-2019, a resolution urging the United States Congress to enact the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kalen. Any discussion?
Thank you, Ronnie, for all your work on this, putting it together. Seems like a good thing to support.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Park City about it because it's bipartisan, you know, regardless of the side, you know, you might individually come from. I think there are probably some people who feel like, you know, you should be doing it another way, regardless of, you know, which other way that is. So I felt good talking to them, and I think we'll probably have the same philosophy here, is that it's just one tool. It's not the only tool. And as we all know, climate change needs to be attacked from umpteen different directions, like housing. So, yeah.
Anything else? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Okay. 10-2. Is that right? Yeah. Resolution 9, 2019, approval of an interlocal agreement between Grand County and Moab City for the transfer of city funds supporting active transportation and non-motorized trails planning and operations, briefing and possible action. I'm not sure how much more briefing we need on this. I mean, we had our presentation at noon from the active transportationers. But David, is there anything to share?
Only that just process-wise, this one just got a little lost in the shuffle, and we had the mayor preemptively sign it back in the day without realizing we need to go back to the process of having the council authorize the mayor to sign the document. Thusly, that's why it might look a little chossy in the version you saw, because I had to go in and do a little erase. But it's the same document that the county council passed back in December, and it's it just memorializes the funding relationship for the active transportation funds.
Can I just ask one question, David? Is there some kind of reporting requirement, or I take it we can ask them to come in once a year and kind of give us a presentation? Or
Definitely, anytime, yeah. And then as part of the budget process, you know, we can also report back out on the last year's money, how it was spent, and then what the anticipation is for the future year's money, fundage.
Thank you.
And it seems like the trail plan will be a whole process with formal. I mean, the city was identified. The city will be integrated into the process as a stakeholder, it says, but I get the impression it'll be more than just the typical. It'll be a major stakeholder.
Very important.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to approve, Resolution 09-2019, approval of an interlocal agreement between Grand County and Moab City for the transfer of city funds supporting active transportation and non-motorized trails planning and operation.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ronnie, any final discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-3, Resolution 18, 2019, a resolution of the governing body declaring city property as surplus, briefing and possible action. So we've got David, do you want to give us any?
Annual or semi-annual event where basically Carmela puts out the call for all the stuff that we don't need anymore, and we go through the formal auctioning process, and one step of that is for you all to bless it thusly. So got a lot on the list.
And bid if we want to buy a rock.
Open to anybody.
Hey, I wanted to ask what the going price was for a large rock or boulder.
That's a good question. Find out. Yeah.
Or $1 million.
Do they deliver?
No, you got to.
Get it.
Needs gone. Pick it up.
Bring your own crane.
Bring your own backhoe.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 18-219, a resolution of the governing body declaring city's property as surplus.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Karen. Any final discussion?
So it seems like there's a lot of vehicles relative to previous auctions. Could you just explain that?
I can't really, other than on the police front, we've been started leasing more vehicles. So a lot of the ones that are, those Chargers in particular, are being surplus because of that. And then we did do a few vehicle purchases as part of this current budget year we're in, and or leases that aren't police related, and so these vehicles are the result of that. Those
and they cost
well.
us money sitting there because we insure them.
Yes.
So even though they're sitting out back with a license, registration, insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them don't run, so it costs us money even if they're just sitting.
Oh, yeah.
It may also be fair to
You
say.
need somebody to test drive them. They're really fun.
Chargers.
And we've just been, slowly getting our act together too.
Okay.
Just one more question is, have we used this TNT company before? Or is that just,
Yeah, pretty standard.
So who buys this stuff typically?
You do.
The public.
If you win the auction. It's an online auction.
Online auction.
Yeah. So let's participate, council members, and buy some stuff from ourselves.
Does it tend to be local people, or can it be people all over the state, or what?
will you guys help me roll my rock to my house?
I probably would. I'd help you out. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 10-4, ordinance 2019-10, amending the zoning for property located at 778 West Cane Creek Boulevard in the RA1 residential agricultural zone to C1 commercial residential zone, and amending the City of Moab official zoning map, briefing and possible action. David?
Yeah, this is me to the degree it can be. This was a rezone request that came in prior to the moratorium going into place, and so it's been processed accordingly. The Planning Commission was briefed and made a favorable recommendation with one dissenting vote at the last meeting. This is taking a small parcel over on Cane Creek Boulevard from the RA1 to the C1, as it says. The parcel is where the Adobe abode is, and it historically has been a bed and breakfast, but has not been in operation as one for a little over a year. Regardless, it's always important to remember that whenever you're thinking about a rezone, you're thinking about the zone, not specifically the parcel per se, even though it's kind of tricky in a situation like this where we are talking about a specific parcel that's being rezoned. But at the end of the day, you have to always keep in mind that you're rezoning to allow for the uses that would be allowed in that zone, not necessarily just what someone may tell you they're going to use that parcel for, right? Of course. The Planning Commission deliberated on this for quite a while. They heard from the applicant, and the only point of, I think the only reason there was a dissenting vote was there was one commissioner who was concerned about the notion of it feeling a little bit like a spot zone, and while that's not necessarily illegal at all, it's not illegal at all, it's not always the best practice, but the rest of the commission felt that that was, that did not outweigh the value that a rezone would bring to this parcel and to, I guess, to the city as a whole. So.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Let's have some discussion before I ask for a motion. Does anybody feel strongly either way?
I am a little uncomfortable. I'm a lot uncomfortable making a decision on an overnight rental while we still have the moratorium in place.
Well,
oh yeah, just sorry to interrupt, Tawny. I mean, this is a zoning.
I know.
Change, so.
But we're still making a decision on an overnight rental. And depending on what comes back to us in July or August, I'm just really uncomfortable.
Bed and breakfasts are no longer allowed in this zone that we're changing the zone to be?
Well, so if you change the zoning designation for a parcel, everything that is now permitted in that parcel becomes a use by right, or in that zoning district becomes a use by right. That doesn't mean that that is fixed forever. You could change it a month from now. and change the uses that would be allowed uses within that zoning district. And unless there is an established use that that vests under our law, there would be a potential that someone could change into a particular zone, but the requirements for that zone could change down the road. So you're not allowing, well, what you are doing, if you grant a rezone request, you're allowing any uses that are currently uses by right in that particular zoning district.
And we've also created Peninsula right down there in the middle of the RA1.
The opposition that I have for that is that directly across the street is industrial.
Yeah.
And so, and to have a 4,500 square foot house turn into a house compared to having it as a bed and breakfast where the host lives there and is able to educate its guests, and it's an opportunity not to have a hotel. And you're in the C1, what is it, hospital, small commercial. I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those transitional commercial zones for lower level intensity commercial uses. Well, there's your packet has the list of allowed uses in the C1.
Yeah.
Because additionally, I mean, the owner of that property could do a small retail establishment.
A restaurant.
Yeah, there's a whole range of uses that are allowed in that particular zone.
And for what it's worth, your planning commission recognized that and found that to be a plus in thinking about this in terms of the rezone. Potential for that type of low intensity retail or commercial to exist in that spot, given the lack of, or the need for that in town.
Can we just get a recap for the benefit of the people who didn't get, I asked for some history on how this happened because I knew B&Bs weren't a conditional use in the RA1. So I was wondering, why do we think this happened, or how do we think this happened in the first place? And Summer did a good job explaining, but I didn't know if we could just recap it because I didn't know if everybody had a chance to get that history or.
Because of the cottage industry?
Yeah, it's kind of a funky one. I don't know, Summer, I might ask you to actually speak to this one since you did do the research on it. It's definitely, there's been obviously a long history relatively of a B&B use there, but the way it came about initially is a touch murky, I think it's fair to say.
It's still a touch murky. I researched the business license application for this particular property, and the original business license, when it was approved, the application itself said it was allowed in the R2 and the R3. And then some things happened, some life changes occurred, and at that point in time, the owner of the bed and breakfast, Keith, came in and put it in his name. And the application at that point in time actually included the RA1 as a permitted zone for bed and breakfasts. I looked through the code. I haven't seen any of those changes to the RA1, other than there was an ordinance that was passed in 1994 that basically allowed other uses that were deemed compatible with the uses in the zone. So I hate to say assume, but it would be my impression that that at the time that was approved, that they believed that that was a compatible use with the other uses in that zone.
Well, and that was the time we were heavily promoting tourism, and that was what a lot of people did.
Mayor, just one thing I was going to add. The criteria for a zone change are specified in your ordinances, and I'll recite them for you briefly just so you can weigh that. Whether the existing zone was adopted in error, whether there's been a change in the character of the area, including but not limited to installation of public facilities or infrastructure, whether there's a need for the proposed zoning within the community, is the proposed zoning classification compatible with the surrounding area or uses, or will there be adverse impacts associated? And will benefits be derived by the community or area by granting the proposed zoning? And also, well, they go on about adequate facilities available for the type of development that would be allowed by the proposed zoning classification, et cetera. So it's truly a broad set of policy considerations as to whether this particular zoning proposal fits within the broader scheme. And you also need to consider what your advisory documents contemplate.
So Chris, if I got this right, we could, if we approve this particular zoning request, Mr. Herman could operate a B&B, assuming he do so. Then later on, as a consequence of the moratorium and any changes that we might make, we could remove that use.
No.
Well,
He would still be able to.
First off, if you...
Because it would be by right.
Let me back up.
No, I'm talking about new, Mr. Herman would be grandfathered in.
Yeah, he would be,
not?
yes, grandfathered
Yeah,
in.
but any new uses of bed and breakfasts could be disallowed if we chose to do so.
Okay, first off, I'm not fully conversant on the details of this particular use, but I understood that the bed and breakfast use has been abandoned, essentially?
In this particular, for this particular property? Yes, the business license was canceled or
so it doesn't
expired.
exist.
It doesn't exist. It hasn't been in operation for a little over a year plus.
Okay, and if you grant a rezone application to the C1 zone, that bed and breakfasts are now a permitted use in that particular zoning district. However, we do have a moratorium, so it means that those new uses are not being permitted right now.
And the implication of that is that if we decide that we want to no longer, and we're in the moratorium right now, then it steps a foot forward. And the reason why we are in a moratorium is,
To answer Mike's question, the application was filed prior to the moratorium, so it's being processed. If you granted the zone change and the applicant acted upon a permitted use, in this case, if he wanted to go get a business license and open his bed and breakfast, and then in August 12, you enacted land use that pulled that from that zone, it would pull it from that zone in its entirety, but those who were acting under that permitted use would be grandfathered.
He'd continue to,
It's spelled out in the moratorium.
Right.
So just one clarification. There's not a moratorium on zone changes.
No.
So regardless of the moratorium, people can apply for zone changes today.
Yes.
Even if regardless of what their intention is, because that doesn't technically factor in.
If an applicant today filed for a zone change to go from zone A to zone B to build a hotel, and we granted that, and they can't file to come in though to get a permit.
Yes.
Because of the moratorium.
For a business permit.
For a building permit.
So what about for a business permit? Because
business license would be allowed.
Yes.
But if we granted that zone change today and that applicant needed to get a building permit to build the hotel,
yes,
they couldn't prior to the 12th, and they would lose that right before they could vest it. So
yes,
just because we grant it now wouldn't give them the right necessarily to grandfather in just because they had a zone change. They have to act on it.
Yes, but they don't need the building permit because the building exists.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
For this property.
For this property,
yes,
which is the property that we're discussing.
So this bed and breakfast was in operation for over 20 years, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
22.
It was constructed with the intent of being a bed and breakfast. I actually know some of the history on it before I worked for the city, and that was the intent of why it was constructed the way that it was constructed.
So, Summer, and Chris, if I try to interpret the rules by which we would grant such a zone change, it's weak on several accounts. It may have been adopted in error. That's what Summer was alluding to. It's not at all clear that this is in the best interest in the community, considering we're in the middle of a moratorium about disallowing exactly those kinds of things. And there were a couple of others that I think you alluded to too. So the only saving grace as far as Mr. Herman is, he's already, essentially running a B&B there. And if we were to make zoning changes and use changes later on, they're going to impact people who haven't already built, so to speak, because they'll be grandfathered in. So that would be the only saving grace. So to that end, if I may offer a motion which you're welcome to turn down, I would move that we table Mr. Herman's request for the zone change until after the moratorium is completed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so that's a motion to table and a second.
I want to be clear, though, that he filed his application and vested prior to your change, and so you'll still be considering him under the old rules.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so the tabling doesn't pass.
Okay.
I will, of course, entertain any motion at any time at this point. I will say that it's complicated because I agree with you, Karen. Like, it's across from industrial. It's a big, ready-to-go bed and breakfast, and it's been operating that way. It makes sense to allow that use to continue. However, we are under such a microscope in this moratorium that it is very difficult because of timing to be placed in a position to be asked for a zone change, which would allow nightly rentals where they're currently not allowed. So that is the crux, and that is why this decision is very difficult for this council.
So are overnight rentals allowed in the zone, in the I zone across the street?
In the industrial zone? No.
No.
Okay. One thing, I was not in attendance at the Planning Commission meeting, but I did watch while I was in training. And one of the points that Commissioner Marion Feld made was the fact that the C1 does allow for multifamily housing. That was one of the arguments that she made in favor of this, was that, you know, some of the other, the RA1 zone does not allow for that, but there could be, I mean, that is an option that you could have multifamily housing should that use ever discontinue. So that was...
that's a really good point.
That was,
you know what, I didn't really think about that.
Something that she felt was very important as far as that transition zone, and that is one of those areas where you could have some multifamily housing.
But that's not what Mr. Herman intends to do.
Not at this point in time, but he may own the property for a little while, and the next person may decide that's not the route that they want to go, and
we have to consider everything that could happen.
Correct.
If we choose to rezone that.
And that would be anything that's allowable in the C1 zone.
Which is not overnight rentals. It's a bed and breakfast. And I mean, it sucks because it really is terrible timing.
And to be clear,
it really is just the worst timing.
Our bed and breakfast ordinance does require in commercial zones that they have a property manager live on site. The owner could obviously live there as well. In residential zones, it does require, although we removed it from residential zones, it did require that the owner live on site. So it's not something that it's going to sell and you're not going to have someone on site. That is a requirement of the bed and breakfast, to have a manager live on the property.
Unless somebody turns it into a restaurant.
Unless they, yes, then they don't have that
And they
same
wouldn't be a bed and
requirement.
breakfast at all.
Correct.
But they could do that where they wouldn't otherwise right now.
And in the C1, there was recently the change that if you had the restaurant on the bottom floor, you could do housing above with that C1 change.
C1 and C2 are good zones.
And I mean, I think we were hoping to expand, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the hope, to sort of expand C1, expand commercial uses in our,
So,
I mean,
It's not going to happen.
so I voted no on the tabling just because I felt like it deserved more discussion, not because I wasn't ready to make a decision on tabling. I do live close to this property and have lived there for 18 years. And as it's been operated as a bed and breakfast, it was quite unobtrusive to the neighborhood, in my opinion. And it's also on a street that is heavily traveled by ATVs, so some of the concerns about bed and breakfast drawing ATV drivers, I don't think it's quite so applicable as a concern here. because King Creek is already overrun with them.
Thank you for sharing those
No, I
observations
really
because I
appreciate
didn't
that.
want to ask you, but I did
Yeah.
want to ask you.
But it is in a low-density residential zone. I mean, as it's developed now, it's the RA1 zone, which is quite low density. And so even though it's been operated as a bed and breakfast, I felt like it's fit in to the character of the neighborhood. No telling what a new proprietor would do. I mean, I've heard like with the Fandango that it could be noisier, but that's neither here nor there in my opinion. I feel like the argument that we need more C1 and therefore it should be approved is a little weak because if we may need more C1, but then I feel like that should be approached via the future land use plan process as opposed to this, which is in effect a spot zone in my opinion. And it's not part of a coherent plan. It just happens to be one property owner has a particular goal, which is being able to run or sell their property, I imagine, as it was designed and operated in the past. And I mean,
is it possible to pay a penalty or a fine for having their license expire? I mean, it seems really unfortunate that they didn't do any commercial business in that year to.
It's unfortunate.
Well, but I mean, when you go to re-register a property out of commercial and into residential, it's usually because of a tax implication. My assumption, and Grandma told me never to do that, but was that the change of use was stated for savings and tax, paying tax. So, but I'm seeing shaking of no. So, because I know that the difference between the tax for a B&B or a nightly rental, when you're paying that tax, is like, it could be like the difference of almost.
But in this scenario, Mayor, when
10,000 versus like 1,000.
When the property license was terminated, it was not rezoned. So they would have had no classification change by no longer operating their business. They would have paid the same.
It's your property tax with the
They changed it.
The assessor's office would have made the change, and it would have dropped dramatically what the tax implication would have been. So I get why the saying, "Hey, we're not doing a B&B anymore." Yeah. Lower our tax.
So September is when we're looking at getting out of our moratorium.
August 11th.
Yeah. Oh, August.
I think because the application was in before the moratorium, that's the one argument for moving forward regardless of the fact that we're in a moratorium, because the application came in before and the Planning Commission favorably passed it before the moratorium was enacted. Is that true?
No,
or after?
They just did that a week and a half ago.
So the applicant came in December and discussed with us. He tried to get a business license, and we discussed with him as to why he was no longer eligible. We sat down and met with him and discussed what his options were in order to reestablish the bed and breakfast. Because it was the holidays, they chose to wait until after the new year just to get the holidays out of the way. And then they brought in the application, I believe, on February 3rd, 4th. So no one knew we were doing the moratorium when they brought it in. It wasn't a rush to try and beat it. This was in process for a few months prior to it being filed. So, yeah. And again, because it's just a zone change, even if it had come in after the moratorium, it wouldn't make a difference. The only reason the moratorium has anything to do with this is because if they had to file for permitting, it would come into play there. And in this case, it's already built, so it won't.
So we have 5 council members, and I don't get to vote, but I will say that there is one other consideration, and that is that our Planning Commission did send it to us with a favorable recommendation, and it's important to recognize too that the members of that Planning Commission are smart, thoughtful people, and I guess I would be inclined to support the recommendation of the Planning Commission with this decision. But again,
Can I make a motion?
sure.
I make a motion to approve, sorry, I don't have it up here. Oops. Sorry, guys. Does anybody have it? Is this it? Oh, perfect. I make a motion to approve ordinance 2018-10, changing the zoning for property located at 778 West King Creek Boulevard from RA1 to C1, and amending the City of Moab official zoning map.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second? There's not a second. So, too bad for that motion. Is there another motion?
Yeah, I do have a question for you guys. Should this motion fail at this point, could Mr. Herman, after the moratorium period expires or anytime he wanted to, reapply for the zone change?
You can reapply, don't you think?
Well, my question to Summer was if there was a time frame. Most cities have a rule that says if you were denied a zoning change, you have to wait 2 years prior to reapplication.
Yeah, we don't. We don't have that built into our code.
You might have to go back through the whole process.
Yeah.
So.
But it's not denied, nor is it tabled, nor is it approved.
And we don't want to do a conditional use.
Oh, definitely not. We just got rid of those.
It's not an option.
Well, I hope that it's this deliberation is illustrative. Help me out.
Illustrative.
Of how very difficult this decision is because of the timing. But decision we must. Wow. So if I feel like the idea to table until the moratorium is over had some weight, but Kaylin, I look to you because you were saying that you weren't opposed to it, or maybe you wanted to amend it to be a different type of tabling, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well,
Which
I found
essentially
it
would
difficult.
not deny it.
No, I mean, I found it difficult to respond to Karen's motion because, continuing the existing use, I think is fine, but it's a zone change, and it's just unfortunate that in some ways that
It's coming up at the time it does. Yeah.
well, just that the rules are the way they are, and that we've outlawed B&Bs in residential zones in some ways, like, I don't know, it's almost like this is a defect in some ways in our zoning, in that how we accommodate uses is imperfect. So, I mean.
And even if we take the moratorium out of the picture, we're still creating a little peninsula, which is not
right.
Really great planning or zoning.
I mean, I almost wanted another 2 weeks to think about it because I wasn't prepared to make a decision.
Well, that could be a table. You could table for 2 weeks as an option, as a motion, to just have a little more time. Although you will be faced with a decision in 2 weeks, so that's up to you all as well. Because you could at least take the next 2 weeks to get more constituent input.
If I had 2 more weeks, I'd probably be more comfortable if I could come talk to Joel in summer. If I could just.
Well, that's a good enough reason to table then. It just
doesn't.
And I'd also like to just say that I'm not as fearful of spot zoning, because especially with the pad, we potentially could be looking at doing something just like that.
That's a good point.
So I just want to put that out there.
What would happen if we did more than just that one parcel along that road? What if we
Yeah, you can do general rezonings.
Can you pull the map up?
I thought there was thorny state requirements.
Who's got the dongle?
You can do
David, can you pull the map up?
you can do multiple properties as part of, it's within your legislative authority to rezone. It's not dependent solely on the application of a landowner, but the process is more cumbersome. And again, it's a more wholesale process of looking at what are the appropriate zoning designations for multiple properties. In practice, a lot of times, rezoning decisions have been driven by individual landowner requests and individual landowners' needs, and that's not optimal because, I think as Tawny pointed out, you should be looking at the bigger picture. But the other point that's important to understand is that there's really no such thing as a spot zone anymore. The law in Utah expressly recognizes that the size of the parcel or the number of owners that might be subject to a particular rezone is not a defect. But you do need to be able to look at how a particular rezoning request fits in with your overall land use plan, your advisory documents.
I think that's something we really need to consider with getting rid of conditional uses, because this is something a conditional use was built for, and where we've gotten rid of those.
No, but we got rid of them because of the B&B issue.
They're a whole nother nightmare unto themselves. I fully support not
Because
having
of the
them, but
B&B, so
it's
that we
going
would
to
not be stuck in a situation talking about conditional uses and B&Bs ever again.
Without the conditional uses, though, this is where that problem will begin to manifest itself, is through this type of action.
That's why we just need to make a decision. But I do think that it's interesting for us to consider along King Creek. We've got R3, we've got industrial, and we've got RA1, that along specifically King Creek, because it's so arterial to recreation, that we do consider that, just like we're doing the spot area look-see at the Center Street and the Center Street and the different, you know what I mean, the different little zones, that this could be a zone of focus, a planning zone of planning focus for us. And so if we were to approve the zone change to a C1, then it would be interesting to consider along the King Creek corridor what it would look like to have restaurants and little shops and bed and breakfasts and, you know, some commercial along that corridor too. I mean, it's not, and maybe expanding the R3 zone somewhere throughout that area as well.
So I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the objectives for each of the zones for the RA1 versus the C1. But the RA1 zone, it does talk about the zone is currently characterized by large lots or tracts of land interspersed by dwellings, barns, corrals, and agricultural service buildings used in connection with farming operations. While the zone is thus characterized, it is intended that the land within this zone shall be further developed into a residential environment exclusive of animals and fowl. So it is really kind of, the RA1 is kind of intended to move into more residential development or higher density residential development, something along those lines. It says builders and developers of property should bear in mind, therefore, the primacy is given in this zone to residential development, and that the raising of animals and fowl will likely be curtailed as residential development takes place. So it is kind of one of those zones that while it exists at this point, the idea is that it will change over time.
Go back to the map. Because I don't think I'm proposing getting rid of the farms. No. I'm just saying, like,
that's
from
just what the
King
intent
Creek
of the zone
in
talks
by,
about.
like, 300 feet along would be, of consideration. Because it's kind of a busy street. And the only reason I say that is not because we're going to make that decision tonight, but that would at least give us some assurance if we were to move forward to pass this zone change, that we would feel, we feel comfortable in like what we would look at in 2, 3, 5 years of planning along the King Creek corridor. It's only going to get more busy as recreation happens along King Creek. We need to, if nothing else, this is spurring us to realize that looking at the corridor is important.
I'm glad this whole discussion came up, all right, because it started us thinking about what we want to do with this little piece. I just don't want to jump the gun and preempt and make the decision now. That's all I'm trying to say.
And I guess the way I'm looking at it is,
And we have
it's
to
been a
remember
bed
that
and
that's a
breakfast for
county
so
road.
long.
That's a county road, it's not a city road.
So it's so weird, isn't it?
Well, from Fifth West west.
Yeah, we
it's
know
a county
somebody
road,
that
not a city road.
Doesn't the city maintain it?
Nope.
But it's
Nobody maintains it.
I take umbrage to that.
Well,
It's maintained to the end of the pavement.
we've got annexation to talk about in that whole area, so. Well,
If we could have 2 more weeks and maybe I could come to some better conclusion, but I don't feel.
we'll give it a motion.
Move that we table this for 2 weeks until we can have discussions with staff and better understand what is possible along that.
Thank you, Tanya. Is there a second?
I can second that.
Thank you, Ronnie. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll talk about it in 2 weeks. Okay, and final item on our agenda is 10-5 master fee schedule, initial bereavement.
Masterpiece schedule, is that what you said?
Masterpiece. The master fee schedule. So David is going to brief us now on the master fee schedule, but there's no action to be taken today.
Correct. It's as much as anything just an introduction to what it is and what the goals are, and to just show you the format. The deal is this: the city charges various fees, fines, rates. Multitudes of these exist. Some of them exist in writing. Some of them exist in ordinance, in the code, I should say. Some of them actually exist as resolutions over the many years. Some just have emanated thusly, yes, from the ground and the heavens.
On the papyrus.
The point being that we are really ultimately a little bit vulnerable when we can't always point exactly to where the source, the legislative authority is to charge a certain fee or rate. A lot of them are obviously clear, and we know, but some of them aren't. So what this does is it puts them all into one place. The way that I'm organizing it with Tara Collins' help and with Chantel's help and with Rachel's help is this is what it is, or what we think it is, and then there's going to be a column that says this is what it shall be, and that's really our opportunity, your opportunity to say, what you think the fee should be, if you think they should be different from what we're saying that they currently are or ought to be. And so it's really been quite the process. The document that was in the packet is very much an iterative draft. It's already changed. There's going to be a bunch of more changes coming. We need to update some fees from the MRAC in particular, and I think from the MARC as well. And I know the question had come up from a couple of you about, is this a chance to change a lot of fees? And is that a thing? And the answer is yes. And unlike with land use, I will say, it makes extra sense, I think, to do this in this context, because we're finally getting them all into one place. So that's what's happening. It's super exciting for me and the public, because they'll be able to see all these fees in one place, and it will actually be in city code as opposed to in a resolution.
So this will all be part of code, and that's what you just said.
Correct.
Right now, if a number of these fees have existing ordinances or resolutions or rose like dead people out of the ground, you're going to notate all that as well, And if we change, and we make, is this, in other words, when we're all done, is this guy gonna be the master for all these fees?
The master consolidated fee schedule. And what we'll end up doing most likely is one ordinance that says, here's all the fees. And then we're going to have to do another ordinance that goes through and edits out all the sections of code that reference fees, because there are quite a few. But what we'll do is anytime there's a place in the code that says, you know, would have said so-and-so is charged, or this is the garbage rate, or this is the sewer rate, it will say, see the section blah, 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 where the consolidated fee schedule is.
So we're gonna be forever amending this section of code because it's, anytime you change any one fee of hundreds and hundreds of fees in there, if not thousands, this guy's going to have to get amended.
Absolutely. And what that will do is a couple of things that I think are really positive. One, it's very transparent, you know, and two, it will, I think, help discipline everyone to not that this happens really, but it'll help prevent code fee changes happening in a sort of an ad hoc basis. In other words, it'll really, I think, help to be able to say, all right, once or twice a year, we're modifying the fee schedule. And if you have fee changes the staff want or the council wants, we'll save them up and do them all at once so that it's not as ad hoc.
I want to ask Rachel, just just by show of thumb, like, are you excited about moving forward with the master fee schedule? Good, okay. I thought it would be important to get that sort of nod from Rachel too.
Okay, so David, Chantel showed some charts a couple of weeks ago about fees involving long-term, short-term rentals, and so those fees are in here as well, or would be.
They will be, yes, if they're not already.
In her case, she was talking about not only fees to get a license to do something or other, but a lesser fee oftentimes to renew.
Correct, that will be in there.
That'll be in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is coming to us to our next meeting.
That's the goal,
for discussion and possible approval.
Right.
And it will include the direction that we gave regarding business license, since that was not on our agenda tonight.
Correct.
Or sorry, not business.
Long-term rentals.
Rental, which I think we settled at 26. For the first, and then 10 each additional per parcel or per development or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's one fee in here. Operating long-term rental without business license, $750 per day per infraction. And the code references Ellison updated fees, doc, P&Z 1119, citing such and such section of city code. So does that mean that currently anyone operating a long-term rental without a business license is subject to a $750 per day fine? According to your best, what?
What page are you referring to?
This is on page 111 of our packet in the PDF.
Given the current, no, because you all actually did not pass a business license requirement yet for the long-term rentals, right?
Okay, then what does that January 1st, 19 date refer to Ellison? I mean, Ellison updated fees doc
is referring to, I think that's referring to a document that Barry helped us put together for fees moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just slightly alarmed to see that.
Just in
no
January.
Need to be. Yes.
So that hasn't been approved by the council.
Right. When Barry came on, I think he identified a bunch of fees that
inspection
as
fees.
part of inspections and enforcement that would probably be good to have in our fee schedule.
But we never approved them.
Correct.
So how are we charging fees?
That's what, to Kaylin's point on this one, we're not doing that.
Well, no, but like if somebody has an inspection, they're gonna.
Yeah, I think we're following the county's fee schedule on that for now.
We should probably put that.
Oh yeah, they're in here.
Yeah, for approval.
So it seems like consolidating them is good, and just the tabular layout of some of the existing fees is a little easier to read and comprehend than this format. Is this the format that you're proposing it will appear in code?
Definitely.
Because this is somewhat, Like, especially when there's lots of, like, when there's a table of fees, just breaking them out line by line is not as readable and comprehensible. So unfortunately, I'm not sure if.
How would you do it otherwise?
I will say I have spent hours trying to format this because it has been a real bear.
Yes.
So if there are better ways.
Not disparaging your work at all. I can see that this was a ton of work, since it's consolidating stuff that's scattered hither and yon.
And trying to be consistent, going through the table was a challenge too, again, to try to be clear. It just is a lot, right?
Yeah.
I made the comment to David, I would be interested to see what our annual revenue of fees is compared to a flat, low property tax.
Well.
And then everything's free.
And we can. But then you're basically if you.
Don't worry, I'm not suggesting it.
Because then you should be getting residents for some non-resident.
Oh yeah, it'd be different.
So David, one question for you. About all these, I love the little right-hand column over there about where the fee came from.
Yeah.
But can you replace that by a link to the document so nobody?
Oh, hold on, wait. Commercial pays property tax. It wouldn't just be residential.
No, I know, but business own, if
commercial pays a much higher property tax than residential.
Of that.
Yeah. So sorry, I just didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
I mean, I'm just saying, if myself or a business owner who's stuck with a fee wants to go read it conveniently.
You just want like a link to the resolution or something. That's what you're thinking.
Or to the section in code.
Yeah. Well, but okay, this will all sort of subsume. That column I was thinking would probably go away because it's just sort of like the historical background on that, not like
that's for us,
right? Yeah. It's like, all right, some trying to identify for all of us. This did come, organically out of the ground, or this did come from a resolution most recently passed. Like, what I could see making sense is linking to where in the code, like if we're doing a business license fees, where it links to the code back to the business license fees section. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That we can at least do in this document, and to the degree that's possible within what the codifier does, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, more and more I see documents full of links all over the place, and they're very handy. I mean, they're a lot of trouble to set up, I grant you, but
handy links.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion?
I had a bunch of questions in the shared document, so I can make an appointment with you or something to ask those, or I can just do it over email.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, it's okay. I had a bunch of questions about
why fees
this.
Are,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, feel free to either shoot me a note or we can talk about it.
Or do you want to just answer them?
I mean, I can answer them. Yeah, do you want to talk about them now? We can.
No, but no.
I can make it fast. I just get confused about the shared document because I thought we're supposed to put our questions there. So sometimes I get confused. I mean, none of these are that important, but I assume if there's a blank for the fee, it's forthcoming, right?
Yeah, like I said, very much it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
So it'll be much more filled out by the time.
Yeah. And then there are just a lot of references to deleted fees ordinance, and I got myself confused. I'm like, is there a deleted fee? Or these are just referencing in general to older fees ordinances? Yeah.
No, that's a reference to another ordinance that would then pull out
all
the old fees that are currently in code.
Okay.
So put them all here, yeah.
That
so it's like helpful. You could think of that as the cleanup ordinance.
Okay.
There's the creation and the cleanup. We make a mess, and then we clean it up.
Very nice.
A good mess.
Not all fees are in code, is that?
Correct,
okay.
They're not.
Okay.
A lot of them are established by resolution.
Gotcha.
All right, y'all, listen. I want to get out by 9:30, so unless there's any further conversation, I'd like to move on to 11, approval of the bills.
Okay, well, I'll email you the rest of this. Like one was about 3 different zoning violation charges, so.
Okay, Approval of the bills against City of Moab.
Due to the exciting transitional activities happening in the finance department, I'm lacking the necessary information. Like basically, I don't have the PDF of the accounts payable. They're in transition, so I haven't.
So it's fine to not approve the
Fine.
bills for tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Let's
Thank you,
adjourn.
Kaylin.
I will second.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.